Welcome to the dozenth breach report. We're on 12 now, Jason. Can you believe that?
I can't. No,
Yeah,
the
I know.
doesn't.
The dozenth. I love it. Yeah, we took a little bit of a break. We had a holiday weekend there, and so this one's coming a little bit later than usual. But some interesting things here. So you see this one up. We're talking about Ubiquiti. There's been quite a bit going on with this Ubiquiti thing that I kind of want to get into. I have Ubiquiti equipment, so it's personal to me. We also have a really interesting GitHub project that has potentially breached a whole bunch of healthcare information. And our main topic today is following up on Accellion. We talked about Accellion a few of these back now. I think it was like what, number 8 or 9, something like that, right?
Yeah, we did a pretty big deep dive of I think it's the Accellion breach, what we know so far, and
Right.
at the time it was this was back in February, so it was relatively new.
Mhm.
There were more breaches coming out really daily, and it's evolved since then. I think well past whatever I could have imagined it would have.
Yeah, and when we covered it, we looked at the victim list at the time, and it was Bombardier aircraft, which we actually will follow up with today. And what was it? I think Singapore Telecom,
Hmm.
and it seemed almost at the time like a proof of concept attack, and maybe that's actually what happened because these companies, while they had a small breach, it didn't seem to be anything major. Now, most
Yeah.
people who are following breaches have probably heard about a lot of what's been going on now. This is the ransomware game CLOP, CL0P, because they're elite hacksaws, right? Um, so CLOP has, really evolved this attack, and it seems like their main target here now is universities. So I'm going to cover
Yeah.
quite a bit of universities, but we're also going to follow up, like I said, on Bombardier and some interesting stuff around Bombardier.
Yeah,
Um,
that would be good because at the time we weren't really sure what their target was. We thought that they were just in it for financial gain, which is absolutely still true in this case. But yeah, there's some other things in the making there around Bombardier that could give more true intentions behind the attack.
Yeah, they're financially motivated, and we're going to keep that in mind. So let's start off here with Yahoo Finance. Funny, we're talking about financially motivated stuff. So first of all, a lot of this up here makes me sad. So moving down. Um, so yes, Ubiquiti Inc. investigated for possible securities laws violation by Block and Leventon LLP. Investors should contact the firm. And yes, this has already affected their price. Right here, we see last price, so it's gone down 2.5% just in the last 24 hours, and this was on the 30th. So it's been a pretty bad week for them, a
And
couple weeks for them.
for people who don't know who Ubiquiti is, they service a lot of networking equipment, wireless access points, switches,
Yep.
things like that.
I have a ton of it at home. In fact, I recently made the switch to Ubiquiti, so this hurts a little bit personally.
Right. So it's not just business for commercial use; it's also consumers who are using these products as well.
Yeah, so Ubiquiti is primarily aimed at, well, it started primarily aimed at the business. They have, edge routers, modems, delivery stuff for ISPs, but they do have a big consumer arm now. They have really great equipment. I actually really like their stuff. So again, this makes me sad. But what has happened is a while back in March, they sent Ubiquiti users like myself an email that said, hey, we were concerned about a potential security breach. It was relatively limited, but what you should do is you should, reset your password and set up MFA, everything like that. It seemed to be really lightweight. In the weeks since then, it really seems like it was worse than they let on, and it has turned into a major issue. I mean, at this point, they're being investigated by for securities laws violation. That's really major. I mean, being investigated for securities is always going to affect your stock price and the valuation of a company for a very long time negatively.
Right. Maybe not always, but it certainly does take a big hit in the forefront because there's a lot of uncertainty behind it, and what's going to be the outcome of that, and usually the market's pretty good at pricing these types of things in ahead of time, and that's probably what we see in the valuation.
Absolutely. So they're already hurting from this. So let's talk about what happened, right? Like I said, they sent us a very light, kind of a lightweight email of, we think something might have happened, so let's be secure, which you get a lot of that from companies these days doing their due diligence. So
Hmm.
we're really not going to think much of it, which I think is kind of their intent. Now, this came out April 4th from Daniel Krebs on security.
Our boy
So
Krebs.
yeah, so following up on this, oh, it seems to be lightweight. This is why they're under investigation for possible securities issues. So there is now an insider from Ubiquiti who has come forth and said that um, they downplayed what was actually a catastrophic, quote, 2-month breach ending in January to save its stock price, and that Ubiquiti's insinuation that a third party was to blame was a fabrication. So this is where the securities law violation comes from.
Wow.
So they made, when you're a publicly traded company, we saw this with Coors. The
Hmm.
Coors breach, right? You had to file those, was it an 8K, I think, and some other forms that say this is what happened, and it can affect your stock price, obviously, because you can, I mean, especially if you're a network and security company, being impacted by this is going to really hurt. So to be dishonest about that and the details of that in an 8K filing, in a public filing, is not only just a shitty thing to do, but it's illegal.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
it's also bad business practice. I mean, yeah, people might be thinking about switching out their equipment from Ubiquiti, but chances are they're not. I mean, there's a lot of costs involved in doing that type of stuff. But honesty is always the best policy when it comes to breaches.
if I had had my Ubiquiti equipment for a while and I was looking to upgrade anyway, I would probably be considering switching right about now. I
That's
just
fair.
bought this stuff, so you know,
Yeah.
I want to keep it. And to be fair, as a user, there is a lot we can do to mitigate that, and we're going to talk about that as well.
Mhm.
But this is what's interesting about this breach is just the fact that we're seeing a company actually act in what appears to be bad faith here, covering up what was something major rather than doing, the responsible thing like some of these other companies we've covered in their breaches. So here, this is the example. I got this exact email, and this actually pops up in some people's portals as well. Not everyone got this. I'm not sure what the difference was there, but it says, dear customer, we recently became aware of unauthorized access to certain of our information technology systems hosted by a third-party cloud provider. We have no indication that there's been unauthorized activity with respect to any user's accounts. And there's some more in there. As a precaution, do these two things. Change your password, enable two-factor authentication, right? So they give us a prompt to do that there now.
So was it not, was MFA not a default selection, or was it not something that the user was prompted to do? It seems kind of odd.
It is now. Now, Ubiquiti's
Oh,
updated their UI
jeez.
recently, right? But before, when I first set this equipment up, no, like when I signed up and signed in everything, it didn't give me some kind of prompt to set it up. I think when I dove down into the menus to where you can enable two-factor authentication, there was a yellow highlighted excerpt that said, you should do this, right? But it wasn't like this. We remember the Nifty thing we talked about? That guy was like, "Oh, I didn't set
Yeah.
up," and he lost $150,000
The
because of
the
that.
NFT platform, yeah. He
Right.
didn't set
Yeah.
up two-factor authentication. Like you said, he
Right.
lost $150,000 worth of stuff.
So Ubiquiti caught up. I've seen some other platforms starting to catch up too. Like for
Yeah.
example, Coinbase. Coinbase actually, as soon as I tried to do anything there, it said, "Hey, you should set up 2FA. Otherwise, we're about to bombard you with authentication to make sure that you actually want to, move your crypto around," which I appreciate. It's a little bit annoying,
Hmm.
but I appreciate it. I set it up, made my life easier and more secure. Now, this whistleblower here, back to Ubiquiti, he goes by the name Adam, so that's a pseudonym. He spoke on condition of anonymity because he, obviously.
You don't want to get
Here's,
fired, yeah.
yeah, I mean, we know what happens to whistleblowers. They end up in Russia, right?
Oh, jeez.
So here's what Adam said. In reality, the attackers had gained administrative access to Ubiquiti's servers at Amazon's cloud service, which secures the underlying server hardware and software, but requires the cloud tenant to secure access to any stored data stored there. They were able to get cryptographic secrets for single sign-on cookies and remote access, full source code control contents, and signing keys exfiltration. He says the attackers had access to privileged credentials that were previously stored in their LastPass account of a Ubiquiti IT employee. So they were
Wow.
even able to get into an employee's LastPass. They gained root administrator access to all Ubiquiti AWS accounts, including S3 buckets, application logs, databases, user database credentials, and secrets required to forge SSO cookies.
Like the keys to the kingdom.
Right.
Yeah.
Ubiquiti has shipped more than 85 million devices that play a key role in networking infrastructure in over 200 countries and territories worldwide. To talk a little bit about the potential impact of this.
Mm-hmm. So, what? There's a lot there, and I
Yeah.
kind of have a two-part question here. First of all, what does this mean for Ubiquiti customers, and what can this is a lot of access, right? So, what can a threat actor do with this level of access?
Sure. So let me see if I can get access here. So let's talk a little bit about these actual things that they've grabbed here. So SSO sign-on cookies, and all of these, the cloud resources. First of all, S3 buckets. I mean, we saw what happened with people exposing their own data through
Mm-hmm.
S3 buckets, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can store in there. That's like the database blobs, right, on the internet there. Oh, this is the wrong thing. 1.8. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit distracted. I'm trying to pull up an example. I actually want to show you, if I can show it in a secure way, my Ubiquiti setup here so that you can see what this has access to. But Ubiquiti has remote management settings enabled.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops, I need to open up my Authy because I have two-factor because I'm awesome.
There you go. You're a security professional.
Whoop, there you go.
Almost exposed all that in to the public. But so yeah, so while you're doing that, just from a that first part of the question, obviously this is going to impact customers in a very significant way, and
Good.
like it
So
was said.
Ubiquiti has remote access. Like if you need support, this is a really cool thing that they offer, and why their devices can be expensive is they have remote support. And if you're, something's just really wrong with your network, you're having issues configuring something, whatever it is, you can access support. One of the things they offer is the ability to actually remote in and fix network configuration settings for you, which is
Mm.
extremely valuable, by the way, support wise. Like if you're not, a CCNA and you're trying to do subnetting and set up all kinds of, settings on your security gateway or something, this is a pretty valuable service to have. So it's a good thing. I don't want to slam them for having, backdoors into people's systems. It's something that we actually want, but if in the wrong hands, that's obviously access you do not want as a user, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can find our access here. So some things have changed, which is also part of why I'm lost. So yeah, here I can show this to you. Okay, can you see that?
I can, yeah.
All right, see, I have remote access disabled, right? Disabled. And there you can see my email at my personal LLC email there. So, go ahead and spam the crap out of that. I don't care. Sync local admin with Ubiquiti SSO. So we just talked about SSO credentials. So there are credentials stored on these devices. I have a USG, a Universal Security Gateway. It's something you put in front of your router that, it allows threat detection on your network. You can block all kinds of malicious activity. It's a really cool thing to have. It's kind of like a little IDS and IPS to put in front of your router from Ubiquiti. It's really cool, but having access to that is something you obviously don't want. So they were actually able to forge SSO cookies. So what if I had had my remote access enabled, which I never did because I'm paranoid, which is good, they could potentially have the threat actors could have forged an SSO credential, gained remote access using that forged credential, and made any number of changes they wanted to my network. Like for example, if I were to do this, maybe I would set up some kind of port forwarding directly to all of the desktops, completely open, which would allow me to dump whatever I wanted through there as it wouldn't be inspected, make a firewall exception for it, right?
Hmm.
So there's, you can make some holes in the network there to hide on.
And if you can place a file on a computer or on a network, that means you can also exfiltrate data as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or mine Monero, whatever you want,
Whatever your goal is, yeah.
right? So what this whistleblower Adam is alleging here, now again, none of this is actually confirmed, but um, it seems to be a really big deal. They're getting sued. There's securities laws violations. We've got a whistleblower saying it was a big deal, so it's pretty serious.
Hmm.
Now, for a user, what I'll tell you right now, what you should do is exactly what I've done. Disable that remote access unless you absolutely, positively, for some business need, must have that enabled. Turn that off. There's no reason to enable any kind of remote management. And while we're talking about that, just as an extra free tip, turn off remote desktop on your PC
Hmm.
as well, unless you absolutely need that for business reasons. Um, Also, do as I've done and enable multi-factor authentication. Where you can find that in the system settings page if you're a Ubiquiti user. I mean, you should be familiar with this anyway. Ubiquiti is kind of I'd say it's a more advanced one anyway. Not to, I don't mean that in a bad way for
The
anybody
GUI
who's
is
a
pretty
beginner.
friendly,
It's
easy to get
it
around.
is. So you should be aware of where most of these settings are, but make sure you do enable that two-factor authentication. As you saw, I'm using Authy. Authy's cool because Authy, anything that says it needs Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator, Authy will actually work for. Um, I've run into one thing, and I couldn't name it right now, that didn't work on Authy because it gave some just absolutely enormous. Oh, Ping ID. Ping ID won't work with Authy, but most other MFAs will. So set that up. Secure yourself. Don't allow remote actors, and if all of this was true, shame on Ubiquiti. It really upsets me. I don't that
You
as
know,
a
it's just
security professional, I don't like that kind of stuff.
it's bad business practice. It's
It is.
it, yeah, it's just bad. So that's obviously something that we're going to follow up on once more information comes to light. The lawsuit is going to take probably years, a year at minimum, just to get through. And
Securities lawsuits take forever.
yeah, so we'll keep track of that one and see. I mean, in a lot of cases, what ends up happening is you'll have uh, an event like this happens, and then all of these companies, from a business perspective, kind of lens I'm trying to share here, is that they'll go into these big PR goodwill campaigns where they just try and bombard you with like, hey, we're here in the community, or hey, we donate to good causes, or hey, we do diversity, and they're trying to get people to stop talking about and stop thinking about their past deeds and start moving forward and
Oh,
creating
it's
their own
PR.
narrative.
Yeah.
So there's probably going to be some PR campaigns that come out of that just to try and obfuscate everything that they've done. And yeah, shame on them for not being more open and honest with their customers.
Can I just say this is making me more excited for a big story, because keep that PR thing in mind, because that can be used for malicious purposes too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
this one's interesting. So we talked a little bit about this. This comes from, again, Bleeping Computer, which, by the way, I want to take a little bit of a moment to send some praise. Bleeping Computer is really fast with a lot of this stuff. It seems like we have them on every one of our breach reports. So way to
Hmm.
go, guys! There.
Great resource.
GitHub. We had another GitHub one we were going to talk about, PHP. If you're aware of that, it was kind of small. Don't really care. This one I think is way more interesting. So GitHub had a project called Arctic Vault, where they quite literally buried a data vault under the Arctic ice caps in Svalbard, in an abandoned Soviet coal mine, or just coal mine. Yeah, crazy thing, right? So the idea here was to see if they could create a data vault that had a retention life of 1,000 years, a millennium vault.
Huh.
Cool.
Cool experiment, but practical application probably not.
There's going to be some lessons that come out of
Hmm.
this one. So the Arctic Vault now likely contains leaked med data patient records, PHI, aka a absolutely ginormous millennium in length retention HIPAA violation. Good job, GitHub. Um, so, by the way, you can check who's signed into this repository, because Arctic Code Vault, it's a badge. GitHub has badges, if you don't know. So if you can go look at developers, they'll have little, bling on their profiles. And so you can see if they participate in this through Arctic Code Vault. Now, unfortunately, some people who should not have participated did participate in this, and they didn't classify their data properly. They shared sensitive patient data. So this was something that came out last year, and it focused on preserving the majority of open source artifacts published on the website, but porting them onto physical media that could stand the test of time. So this was in support of the free and open source software, just campaign and movement that we have going on, which I really support. I think it's really cool. What I've just my first impression here is that they were maybe a little bit sloppy with the requirements to participate, or perhaps the screening and QC of what was going into this. So
Hmm.
it's good intentions gone bad in terms of this breach here, right?
So yeah, having some layer of screening. I mean, like you said, this is a cool project. It's something that, I mean, you can't really advance any industry unless you're pushing the limits on certain things, and this is definitely pushing the limits on the retention side of things. But for
Yes.
sure, having more rigor in screening, and like you said, the data classification. And I just want to touch on that point real quick, and maybe if you have any other thoughts on it. It's that's something that we see, especially with our own clients. And one of the first questions we ever ask before we do any type of engagements is, do you have any uh, uh, certain data class? Are you doing any data classification, for one? Two, what
You
type of
should be.
data are you? I'd be surprised. What type of data are you actually storing, or have in transit, or interact with? If it's HIPAA, CUI, anything like that. It's really important, and I think it's kind of table stakes in data privacy world.
Yeah, with my experience in the DoD, data classification was the name of the game. I mean, data classification predates computers, in that realm of things. So when I transitioned to the civilian sphere, I noticed that exactly what you're talking about is true. The data classification is something that really a lot of organizations are behind on, is just understanding truly what it means and how to do it and how to protect themselves. And protecting yourself is really important because there's a lot of facets of it, from nation state actors trying to steal your stuff to something like this code vault right here. So somebody just accidentally leaked data in here because it wasn't classified properly, meaning it wasn't protected properly by systems.
Mhm.
So this initial investigation was done by a Dutch researcher named Jelle Ursum, in collaboration with Dissent Doe of dataresearchers.net. Um, they reveal that the patient protected health information stored by MedData. MedData serves healthcare organizations Memorial Hermann, University of Chicago, Aspiris, and OSF Healthcare, and handful of others, has been stored on their Arctic code vault here that we talked about. It's a decommissioned mine 250 meters deep in the permafrost of an Arctic mountain on the island of, or I think it's a peninsula or island of Svalbard.
That's so cool.
It's cool. I mean, this is awesome. I mean, this is a really cool project, and like, it's just so unfortunate that this kind of
Yeah.
overshadows it. Is,
It
but
makes me wonder how it's going to prevent these types of projects from going forward.
right. So jumping over to the researchers who found this at databreaches.net. Metadata investigated this exposure. They discovered that a former employee had saved files to personal folders in public repositories, more
Mm.
than one. The improper exposure had begun no later than September 2019, although it might have begun earlier. So it's kind of a weird sentence to write. The specialists retained by MedData provided them with a list of individuals who PHI was impacted by the incident. A review of the impacted files revealed that they contained individuals' names, one or more of the following data elements: physical address, date of birth, social security number, diagnosis, condition, claim information, date of service, subscriber ID, social security numbers, medical procedure codes, provider name, and health insurance policy number. That's basically everything you need to commit Medicare fraud.
Mm.
Um, or any number of other frauds. I mean, having your social security number and all this is pretty crazy. I mean, a diagnosis. I mean, you could divert prescriptions. You could steal their pills. There's so much you could do with that. That's just really unfortunate. I mean, that's about as severe of a HIPAA violation as you could possibly have.
Right.
I'd charge you $10,000 for every single one of these comments here.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what gets people to actually act and, be more rigorous about protecting this type of information, classifying the data. I mean, storing that data on a personal device. I mean, that's just silly.
So Metadata said they've taken some steps. They've implemented additional security controls, blocked file sharing websites, updated internal data policies and procedures, implemented a security operations center, and deployed a managed detection and response solution.
Okay.
So basically, they got their state of security, up to date with 2021 and really like
Oh man,
2010.
this is
They're
just
behind you.
another,
They should have
this,
already done this.
yeah. This is another case where you get away with it long enough until you get hit, and then it's, oh crap, now we should be doing this. It's like,
And so here's a section of security that, honestly, I don't hear gets talked about much anymore. It's something that is done, is fairly common, but data loss prevention.
yes.
Data loss prevention is really important, and it's something that you need to have enabled on your endpoints, because the fact that an employee was able to save this PHI, first of all, on their workstation is
Mhm.
wrong. In my opinion, the way that you should be using data, this is the way that we had it set up before, is if it's sensitive data, the data stays on a data server. If you're opening it in Word, that is totally fine, but the location it saves to and the only place you're allowed to save it to is the server that it came from. And the reason you do this is because you only need to worry about the security on that server, right? If somebody can save it to their workstation and put it in their trunk and their car gets stolen, you've lost all of the access to
Yeah.
that data. Now, this is something that happened to my personal data records quite a while ago with TRICARE. I'm sorry, this is something that happens, so I'll have to throw some people under the bus every once in a while. Every breach report, right?
It
Somebody's got
happens.
to be a victim. So, they had this. This is actually a job I used to do too, which is where you do the tape drive backups. So you
Hmm.
have a duffel bag that locks with the lock full of tape drives, and you put them in your government Dodge Caravan, and you drive them to the data store facility, and you put them in the vault, right? Well, somebody decided to stop at Subway on the way, which I know now you're not supposed to do. At the time, I'm not sure if it was a rule, but he stopped there, and somebody stole that vehicle, including all
Wow.
the tape drives. So that was a gigantic data breach of PHI. And I mean, that was back in like 2006, forever ago. It's kind of a
So,
less sophisticated attack, but it's the same kind of breach, right?
yeah, it's atypical. It's not behind the keyboard, it's someone behind the wheel, your wheels.
So here's where we get to the outstanding question here with this breach is, was all the data actually removed from this project? The reason this is a question is because of how awesome of an experimental vault GitHub built. The Code Vault is a data repository and a very long-term archival facility. It is located in a decommissioned coal mine in the Svalbard archipelago. Sorry, let me pronounce that correct. The Svalbard archipelago, by the way, it's close to the North Pole. It's northwest of Russia. It's north of Norway. It's up in the Arctic Ocean up there, 250 meters below the surface.
Hmm.
That is an absolutely crazy data vault. It's supposed to last 1,000 years. So one thing they don't really go into details here is what that hardware consists of. I'm kind of curious about what kind of physical media lasts 1,000 years. That's really cool. Um, the code was a big part of that as well. I mean, code can be static. I'm really more concerned about the physical media. It can't be platters. Platters will degrade over that amount of time. But
Yeah,
they don't get into that. It's
it's
kind
kind
of
of
cool.
interesting.
What a weird breach, though, right? Like there could be medical data for 1,000 years stored up there, if they don't actually manage to properly mitigate this. So aliens will grab it.
Yeah, I mean, a fun experiment, but maybe a lesson learned the hard way for them.
Yeah, so I mean, really, there's two people at fault here. One is GitHub. I'm gonna put them at fault
Hmm.
in second place. First and foremost is Meddata. Meddata should have already
Okay.
had what they implemented later in place, data loss prevention, all that stuff. That was completely they're wrong there. Now GitHub though really should have had human moderators though looking at the data going into this. I mean, what if like child porn had been put in there? I mean, what kind of moderation was put in there? It really makes me question it. I'm not saying that was something that happened, but it does make me wonder if med data got in there, what else is in there?
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Well,
Okay, now the
um,
big one.
yeah, let's shift gears to Accellion and the most recent breaches.
Yeah, so we mentioned this earlier. We've talked about Accellion before a few months back. It was a kind of small breach. They breached Bombardier, they breached Singapore Telecom. Most of those were mitigated, or so it seemed, without breaching too much data. But um, they've been making headlines, so you've likely heard of some of this activity in the last couple of weeks here. It seems like their primary target has been universities. They have targeted more than a dozen universities. There's 6 major ones listed here on this article from Inside Higher Ed. So, sensitive information from the University of California, Yeshiva University, University of Miami, Colorado, Stanford, Maryland, Baltimore, as well as Brown was something I was following as well.
Yeah.
And numerous other institutions have been victims of this ransomware attack through the Accellion cyber attack. So all of these universities had the Accellion FTA, which, remember, is a 20-year-old legacy device.
Hmm.
Boo.
Yeah. Why are they still using that? Big institutions. It's bizarre to me that they would, even having known that this was the Accellion breach came to light, December of 2020, beginning of January of 2021. Why were they still using that? Why weren't they upgraded? Had they already been impacted and this is
Right.
the fallout? There's some questions that need answers.
And this whole FTA thing, it just, I smell opportunity. One, like, I mean, somebody should be out there with a brand new secure FTA, right?
Hmm.
To kind of show Accellion what's what. But why this one? Why did you need to hold on to it for 2 decades? What was special about it? It doesn't seem like it's been supported to the level it needs to be in terms of, vulnerability management, development on code, bugs in the code and all that. So, um, I looked a little bit into what it's doing. There's this thing called KiteWorks, so it's a lot about file management. And I what I can't figure out is what the advantage is over using something like a Redshift database in AWS, for example, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could, the simple answer could just be that it was an application that works. Let's continue to make it work. It's cheap to keep using. Let's not give it a second thought. And this is very
Yeah.
common because the people who are using these applications probably aren't thinking about security.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the old adage, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
But it begs to question the
It's
people
time
who
to
are in
retire.
charge of security for these health systems for these universities. Why wasn't this something that was flagged?
Yeah, so there's a couple sides there. So one, I think, one, like I said, it's kind of time to retire this whole idea of let's keep using the thing that works. Is you need to be using the thing that makes sense for your business every single year. And, the threat scape is constantly evolving. I love to use the Cold War term, but to be honest, these days, I don't think Cold War is appropriate. Honestly, Jason, I think this is a war. It's a war now.
Hmm.
It's a cyber war. And if you are on the internet, you are involved in the cyber war. And, holding on to old legacy stuff has never worked out in traditional warfare, and it's not going
Right,
to work
that's
out in
true.
cyber warfare. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think back to like World War One when I forget which country they were still doing cavalry charges
No, that's
against
World War II. While the
World War
Germans were
Two.
marching panzers into
There you
Eastern
go.
Europe, they were on horseback.
Cavalry charges against machine guns and tanks. I mean, this is a that analogy I think applies here.
It does. I mean, that's basically what's happening. If you've got old, tried and true stuff that you don't want to update, and this really applies, and I'm going to put them on blast here, is operational technology,
Hmm.
OT, SCADA, which to me is even more frightening because a lot of this stuff is responsible for human safety equipment, right? they're running on legacy stuff like this. So we've kind of gone a little bit tangential. So going back to this university thing, I mean, it's the same kind of thing though, right? We're relying on 2-decade-old legacy software, and now we're seeing what the results of doing so is, right?
Mhm.
Um, I'm being a little bit pessimistic about this, but to be honest, this kind of thing does frustrate me as a security professional. I know people and organizations don't like to go through the process of going through bidding for a new contract and getting new vendors and all that, but you have to, because some of your vendors aren't keeping their stuff up to date.
Mhm.
And so CLOP, that's who's running this ransomware against Accellion, has come in here and they have just, I mean, some of these universities they've decimated. So Brown University was one of the first ones I was looking at. They actually had to take a bunch of their systems offline
For a couple
entirely.
days, right?
More than a couple days, like an
Oh,
entire week.
oh wow.
There's some stuff that's still down right now. I mean, they're able to run classes and all that, but not everything is 100% back.
Right.
I mean, it's been 14 days at least.
So do you know why, or do you have a feeling of why universities are a target for Accellion or for the CLOP ransomware game?
Yeah. So, and real quick, I want to open the scope here. So let's take a look here. I have to pull all this stuff over, but check this out. So it's a good question. Is why, right? So let's bring
It's
this over
always the
here.
good question. Yeah.
Look, University of Colorado, 310,000 records.
Wow.
UC Net, University of California, right? Watch out for suspicious emails. So apparently there's already phishing campaigns against their students as of April 5th. University of Miami, right? Another giant one. Data theft, right?
There you go. There's a free there.
There
Yep.
you
They
go.
want they want you to have some identity protection. They want you to freeze your credit. Yeah.
Yep,
So
University of
I see.
Colorado. We covered this one before,
Yeah.
right?
They were
Stanford.
one of the first ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so
So
so they're trying to impersonate fraud. They're trying to open up loans in other people's names, things like that. They have all the information, and I'm guessing, I'm thinking, when I was in school, when you're applying for colleges, you give away all of your information to these
yeah.
universities.
Oh yeah.
And the university that I went to was a state school, but they weren't spending a lot of money on security. I know that for a fact.
Look, I've done pen testing against university campuses. Nobody's spending that much on
Yeah.
security. Um, and even if they are, it just I'm sad to say I have yet to see a university security system that is really that effective. But to be fair, though, I mean, consider what they have to deal with. I mean, there are thousands, and at some of these systems, tens of thousands. I don't know what the highest, you know, population university is, but many, many thousands of users on their systems, right? Who are every year there's new ones. Every year there's ones that you need to decommission, right? Um, you've got new professors, you've got new staff. So it is a gigantic administrative task to manage all of this. So, you know, I get it. I sympathize. This is not an easy thing to manage from a university side, but what I do think universities need to do is, start to readjust their budgets a little bit and focus their staff hiring a little bit less on the paperwork side. I know it's going to hurt to hear that, and a little bit more on the cybersecurity side, because it's really not something you can do with a small team of people, especially not at a university like Stanford or Brown. I mean, I worked at a company that had 12 staff for 60,000 users, and that's a pathetic amount of people for that. I mean, that's tiny.
How do you even
You know,
support day to day?
it's very hard.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I sympathize with them. So these universities need to get serious about their cybersecurity. They need to make sure that they're keeping things up to date. And yes, that is hard, and yes, that is expensive. But you know what? If you're going to be on the internet these days, you're going to have to do the hard, expensive things until cybersecurity firms and professionals figure out how to make this stuff
It's cost of
easier.
doing business, and make no
It
mistake,
is.
universities are in this for business.
Yeah, if you're in the business and you think that these budgets are hard to swallow. Remember, it's a better cost of doing business to spend a lot of money on cybersecurity than it is to spend a lot of money
A lot
building an
more
entirely
money.
new network or paying off a ransom,
Yeah.
and even if you have cyber insurance, there is something to think about. Is it's not really an entirely get out of jail free card. As with any insurance, when you have an incident, guess what? It gets more expensive.
The
And
premiums
and
go up.
some
Yeah.
of these companies, like, you know, just as with home and vehicle insurance, this is something I learned about insurance, and the same is true for cybersecurity. Is there's a lot of companies out there, and while they're happy to take your money and insure you, when something actually happens, if they aren't a stable company, if they haven't done their financials, if they just don't have enough in the bank to cover a gigantic cost, they can
hmm
actually go bankrupt, and they can't cover you. Like, that's part of their bankruptcy, is like you're just a signed off debt for them, and you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
And that means that they're out of business for a bunch of other companies. This is something that happens all the time, in my state with car companies and with homeowners insurance, because they just don't realize that they're like, oh yeah, sure, we'll insure you, and then a hurricane comes, and they're like, ah,
Yeah.
this costs more than I thought it did, right? And the same is true for cybersecurity insurance. So that's not 100% sure bet either. You really need to be doing the diligence here.
Yeah.
Now
So
look what Brown has done. They have actually changed their access requirements to get at their files. You have to get on a VPN through CrowdStrike. So they've gone out, they've set up Google Drive, Dropbox services, and VPN through CrowdStrike. So good on Brown, but man, they have been just,
they're behind on that. And
yeah.
the thing is, like, when I don't know how much this gets factored into choosing a university, but if I were a parent and I was doing my due diligence on universities, I would start looking at, have they been breached, because I don't want my kids' sensitive information being exposed to the web.
It's probably an unfair thing that will happen, but I could see people looking and be like, "What, an infosec degree from a university that was hacked?" Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the
How
professors
ironic.
probably know, right? It's not really a fair thing, but again, it goes back. It's a business. Schools in America are for profit. It's a business, so
Not
that's
all,
brand
but
damage. Not
the
all, but
ones that we've
many.
covered, yeah.
Yeah, the big ones like this are. Um, and even for those who are nonprofits, that's still a business, and it's brand damage, and you don't want brand damage,
hmm
right? That's less people signing up, that's less money for you, that's a bad thing. So you talked a little bit about their, what is CLOP doing? So they are a financially motivated threat actor. They go back to about 2014. This is a report here from Deutsche Telekom, who is T-Mobile. Now, they have some cool examples. There's a ton of information. We're going to share this link if you really want to get into like the more technical details of
So this is the profile
IOCs.
of the ransomware gang.
Yeah, this is
hmm
CLOP's profile. So here's an example of the .onion. That's the Onion route
hmm
Tor browser website on the dark web. So this is their portal, their leak portal. So first of all, this is their intimidation to show you that, hey, if you're one of these obfuscated websites here, look at some of your data's been published. Haha. Also, we talked a little bit about brand and what is it, PR, right? Here's some cool PR. Malicious PR. Attention, this is from CLOP. We have never attacked hospitals, orphanages, nursing homes, charitable foundations, and we will not. Commercial pharmaceutical organizations are not eligible for this list. They are the only ones who benefit from the current pandemic. If an attack mistakenly occurs on one of the foregoing organizations, we will provide the decryptor for free, apologize, and help fix the vulnerabilities. Aren't they so nice?
Yeah, right. They make it seem like they're doing the service to the public by screwing over the big guys or something. Like,
Right.
we're
It's like
we're the
altruistic hacking.
vigilantes, and
Right.
but it's like, are they giving money back to anyone? Like, they're doing damage, right, at the end
They're
of the
doing
day. And
damage.
all of these have downstream consequences. Employees get fired, and sure, they don't attack a hospital or an orphanage. I don't know if that's even true. I mean, if you got to take their word with a grain of
Say
salt.
whatever you want.
Yeah, for sure. But the other, like I was saying, is like, how many of those people that they did, take a ransom from are out of jobs now? How many thousands of people have they impacted? How many families are in a situation now that
What about the
financially
students in
ruined.
universities? I
The
mean,
students in universities, right? Yeah.
hey, if you want to go after a credit organization, I'm not saying I advocate it, but that's something I kind of get if you want to try to play the altruistic angle. But there's no point in making life hard for universities. I mean, especially university students. Like,
Yeah.
ramen life sucks anyway. And now we have to deal with our files being exposed. Thanks,
The students
jackasses.
being exposed, yeah, the universities, I think, that's another argument for another day,
Right,
but
right, sure. But ultimately, what they've done is they've stolen students' personal information
yeah.
and can potentially be using that for fraud. And it seems like what Brown University, or maybe it wasn't Brown, one of them was saying is, it looks like they're actually phishing students. So I mean, there's nothing altruistic about that. So that's some nice PR that they put on there that, oh, we won't hack an orphanage, but I'll screw everybody else in the world, right?
Yeah.
Here's another thing they're doing on there. So you can actually chat with them, right? If you need support, you can go to their portal. You can open up a chat. This is really cool. So to recover all files on your network and prevent data leaks, you need to pay a fee. To see how to buy the Bitcoins, buy Bitcoins at the tab menu on the top, right? So they've got it. Here's how to do it. Click Demo Decrypt at the menu on top of the site page to decrypt some files for free. So you can even get some of your stuff back to show, like, look, we'll even show you that we can decrypt it. Here's how you buy Bitcoins. It's just like a real business, right? We've got, a chat. You can talk to one of our guys. We'll teach you how to, send us Bitcoins and then you'll be good to go, right? We're good guys.
Scroll up just a second because I think this is a really important point to bring up here. Look at that. They can decrypt it. You can buy Bitcoin. News. I don't know. Probably who latest industry news on who they've hacked, maybe about us. I mean, what they've really done is they've created a business model out of this that's much more sophisticated than I think I've seen from other ransom groups, where it's like, take here's our wallet, deposit Bitcoins, get a decryption key, um, and it's almost as if ethical isn't the right word, honest ransomware,
Right.
where you're going to get you're going to get your files back if you pay, and there's almost kind of an incentive to do that too, because then other people are going to say, well, okay, now I don't have this fear that I'm going to pay them and they're not going to give me my files back. There's some layer of comfort in knowing that if I pay, I'm going to get those files, and that's what it says in the text right there. Our goal is money. We're not interested in causing harm. So what's the easiest way to get money and prove that business model? Well, they streamline this process. Everything is easy to get
Right.
to, easy to do. They have a chat service, for God's sakes. I mean, like, it's just worth pointing out that they've streamlined this and
Look,
really
if you're
perfected
a
the model.
legitimate business, take a lesson here. We can learn something from the malicious actors. Customer service is really important to a business model. The easier you make it for your customers to give you money, the more money they will give you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what these guys have done here. I mean, we're really seeing advanced business models with these ransomware gangs. This is something we haven't. I mean, I'm not gonna say we haven't seen it before, but it hasn't really been a big popular MO, and it's getting more and more popular. And we're starting to see professional looking websites. You can go on there and you can scroll through their websites on these. Uh, a lot of them are on unindexed or on onion websites, but you can go through there and see. Here's a list of our victims slash customers, right? They call them.
Mm-hmm.
So when you scroll through, you're like, oh, I see my logo. Crap, that's me. You can click on there and you can get a quick little snippet of this is my data. And you can open up a line of communication, say, hey, I'm the CISO or a data analyst at this company, and I see my data on here. What gives, right? And they'll give you some demos, and you end up in one of these conversations. Like, look, we just want money, so we'll help you. This will be a simple, easy, pain-free process. Act now, right? Just like any
Yeah,
other
we're
kind of.
doing you a good service.
Yeah, absolutely. So, now I did mention that there was something interesting on here. So, I guess the key takeaways here. Before we move on, I want to cover a couple things here real quick with this. So, how do you prevent this? How do you not be these guys? Well, number one, first and foremost, most obvious is don't use legacy stuff if you don't have to. And believe me, if you think you have to, I bet you if you really start talking to your technical personnel and some vendors, you're going to find a better alternative than old legacy software. Sorry, Accellion, but legacy software sucks. And this is why. I'm just going to say it. That's my opinion as a security professional. Now, number two, you should have segmentation in your network. You should have zero trust if you can afford to do it, which means your file transfer appliance shouldn't be accessible by anything else. Now, the thing that kind of sucks about this was even if you had segmented it, which a lot of these companies have said that they did, it's still an important appliance because it holds these, important data. Backups, constant backups. And they need to be offline backups, and they need to be scanned and secured backups so that you know that you don't have, any kind of uh, you know, malicious stuff going into your backups. Keep a couple different types. Don't just keep something on Dropbox or OneDrive. Make sure you've got tape drives, two types of backup, one in the cloud, one in physical media, with something like this. And that may seem old school and a little bit expensive, but personal student files, I mean, that's your business files of people that you need. That is important stuff that you must back up that way. So when the government does it, you do, like I said, the Tricare thing, right? They drive it off site. So when this happens, what you can do is you can pull up your backups in a sandbox environment, make sure that it's not infected with the same kind of vulnerability, and then you just nuke all this, tell these ransomware guys to go F themselves and load up something new, or just
Mhm.
ignore them if you want to and continue on. That's the right way to do this. Then you don't end up in a situation where you're, deciding between a $1 million solution and a $10 million solution, right?
Right.
Now,
Yeah,
here's something we covered before. Remember, Jason, when we first talked about this, one of the first victims we covered was Bombardier, right?
we did. And at the time, it just kind of seemed like it was another company that got hit.
And what a weird company, right? An airplane manufacturer. And at the time, I couldn't really think of why necessarily. Like, I was thinking kind of a university thing. Maybe they were just looking for staff's information, right?
Or,
Because
they just, it's Bombardier is a significant organization. They have money.
yeah, proof of
Easy
concept,
target to get money,
ransomware.
right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
sure, any number of answers. So it looks like it goes a little bit more in depth than that. So they actually leaked some information from Bombardier on their website, and the initial investigation revealed that they extracted data by exploiting vulnerability affecting third-party FTA. We talked about that before. So they exploited some information. And let's see if we can find out. I'm sorry, I'm looking for it right here. So the data shared included various design documents for Bombardier airplanes and plane parts. No personal data was shared. But the airplane maker is most likely, upset about this whole thing. So what's it? It's a very small blurb here, but they leaked airplane parts and data. And one of the airplanes that they leaked was actually a secret airplane or one that's used for secret projects. That's just something that I picked up. They don't really talk about this whole lot here on ZDNet, but I'm kind of an aviation nerd just as a hobby thing. And, I was looking up something here on the side and I made a connection later this week. I'm like, wait a minute, this Bombardier thing, I remember something about this. And so this led me back to an article I was looking at last year. Um, and so there was a U.S. jet that crashed in Afghanistan. It was an electronic warfare, aka spy plane. And so, this thing came out, right? It's no ordinary spy plane. What came to light later that there was some pretty advanced equipment on here. Now, do you see that?
That looks, I mean, the frame of the airplane looks very similar, right?
There's some difference on the strikes here, but this is a Bombardier aircraft. It's a Bombardier E-11A, and the Bombardier E-11A's designs were part of this leak that they had here. And
Oh,
so the airplane itself isn't necessarily a secret airplane. I mean, it's just an airframe, right? But
but the
when I was
parts that
looking,
were leaked from Bombardier, right?
right, so
Yeah.
this gets kind of into the nitty gritty details, and so let's
Little
talk a little bit about
speculation. Little
what I was looking at.
speculation.
So this plane here that we're looking at is a crashed Bombardier E-11A, and this kind of set off this whole controversy of like, well, what was in this thing, right? It crashed in
Yeah.
Afghanistan last year, and it had the system on board called Bacon, Battlefield Airborne Communications Node. This is a multi-million-dollar communication system. it's a classified communication system. It does voice communications, video, photographic images. It's battlefield information, right? This is something you want in the air over a battlefield that's allowing you to relay all of your intel globally, honestly.
Real-time communication. You can
Real-time
feed that
communication.
back to your command center, and then the commanders can make their decisions.
Right. And that was just one of multiple systems that were on board this. Now, these systems link back to some other systems um, that the DoD manages. I'm trying to be careful here. I don't know what I actually can and can't say. It's some stuff I've worked on, but there's it's important for the battlefield. You know where your troops are. It's stuff you don't want the enemies to see. It's something you don't want anyone else to see, really, unless their job is to move, battlefield resources around. So this is one of multiple multi-million dollar systems on board this spy plane. So I mean, this thing could be $1 billion that crashed here. And so what does this have to do with this whole story, right? So we already looked at this. This is something that was part of Bombardier's data and designs information that was leaked. And so I just found it interesting. It's like, this is something that there's only 4 of these in service with the US Air Force because they're really expensive and they're highly sensitive. And we have had one now crash in enemy territory, and now the airframe of it has been leaked, through Bombardier. What are the implications of this? It's
Right.
a bit
So,
concerning.
the way I think about this, and this kind of gets to having a universal standard of compliance in the United States. And I truly believe that the cybersecurity maturity model certification, CMMC, is pushing us towards that. And from a supply chain perspective, the U.S. government does some type of business with Bombardier. Bombardier has leaked parts that are used in classified, sensitive um, uh, aircrafts and operations. This gets leaked to the enemy, like you said, or out in the world to whomever, and then all of a sudden, other people are able to level the playing field. They're able to manufacture these types of planes to some degree and be able to provide that real time intelligence to their commanders and to their boots on the ground. And that, like I said, levels the playing field, and they're not able to, we're not able to have that strategic advantage.
It's not only that, the strategic advantage, but it actually puts human lives in danger. So
Exactly.
the systems I've worked on that these link back to in the Department of Defense can show you in relatively real time actual physical locations of humans, personnel on the ground globally with the military. And that information falling into the wrong hands is, I mean, that's danger to life. That is
Hmm.
something that can have very serious consequences. So I pulled up a little more information here from Popular Mechanics. So I said the hackers posted the global eye information to the dark website CLOP Leaks, which we showed earlier. That's their global site. So the global eye is this aircraft, and Popular Mechanics is saying it's roughly comparable to U.S. Air Force's E-3 Sentry airborne warning control aircraft, aka an AWACS system. So same thing, right? Um, but this is kind of goes a little bit more details that this is actually what was leaked here. So a lot of stuff on their website other than the content. I always hate that. Um, but yeah, it's just so I think we talked about this a little bit before, Jason. What are the implications here? Like, where's CLOP from? And if they post this stuff for sale, will people buy this? I think they will. Somebody's gonna buy
Hmm.
that. You know, um, China has a lot of aircraft that look like ours, as does Russia. I mean, and that goes back as far as, the 50s. They've got aircraft that look like F-15s, F-16s. Their space shuttle looks like ours. They've got, I did a report a long time ago, and maybe we'll bring that up sometime on our website about stolen blueprints and IP, right?
Hmm.
Intellectual property from America. And there was this so windmills, windmill motors and windmills. There was the design of the Siemens windmill when wind energy was really first, growing in popularity in the United States. The plans for how to build those were stolen by a Chinese APT, and lo and behold, it became one of the number one manufactured designs for windmills in China at the time.
Hmm.
Will they do the same thing with this? Possibly. I don't see why not.
This gets into that hot war that you're talking about. I mean,
Yep.
it's information intelligence is the differentiator on the battlefield these days.
Absolutely.
Whether that's on the physical battlefield or whether it's in cyberspace.
Uh,
And
there's no
Mhm.
difference anymore. You made a
Sure.
distinction, but I want to talk about something real quick that, for me personally, I heard about this and was slightly involved in kind of what happened here. Not that long ago. I guess it was a few years. It was like more than 5 years ago now, I think. We crossed the line, right, between cyber and physical warfare. So there was a cyber warfare attack against Israel, and Israel responded with an airstrike against the cyber warfare center. They identified it physically and bombed it, blew it up,
Hmm.
and actually killed the hackers and disabled the website. That for me was it. That is the step away from the cyber warfare into the physical warfare, and that is a singularity in terms of warfare. I think at that point of where we're hacking
Yeah.
somebody online and we blow people up with a kinetic strike.
And this gets into more of a philosophical conversation, and we probably don't have time to talk about, but what's the proportional response to a hack? Is it bombing someone?
That's a whole website. I mean, that's a whole episode. I mean,
I mean, it's something to dive into a little bit more. But I think we're getting close here on the hour mark.
for
Just
sure.
wanted to wrap up here. If there's anything else that we wanted to discuss with CLOP or with the Accellion breach.
I mean, I don't think it's over yet. We're definitely going to be seeing more of this. This is a really huge breach that's going to continue, I think, and yeah, we'll keep following up. I think it's cool seeing, it's not a good thing, but it's nice seeing, we talked about Accellion before, and now we're following up on it. I hope that our breach reports continue to be kind of informative in that way, that people can kind
Yeah.
of predict something coming down the pipe, especially when we look at these emerging threats, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to leave it there. And our goal here is to bring awareness and to have some preventative or mitigated um, actions that you can take to be more secure, and just overall just trying to get you to think more like a security professional, because in this day and age, I mean, like you said, Josh, there is no difference, and we need to be remain vigilant and start um, implementing more security controls and better hygiene, and maturing our online presence. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
securing that online presence.
and we need to be doing better with our customers. Maybe this is the final thought to leave off is, we see frequently, I can't remember if it's over here. One of these universities, though, they said most of the response, right, and this is financial too, is, well, somebody whose data has been breached needs to make sure that they activate their free, identity theft protection
Oh,
and
right,
watch their
yeah.
accounts. Like they put all of it on the users, and I think that the industry needs to very hard shift away from that. Is it's not on the users to have to now go clean up your mess. It's on you to implement the proper preventative and mitigating controls and software and managed security services you need to protect your clients and consumers. And on the consumer side, I mean, do what I do. I'm going to say this. Please do so. Boycott companies that don't protect your data.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, we'll leave it there, and we'll have more to follow up on this. And until next week, thank you so much.